Hello, welcome to Carol's Story Time. The story I'm going to tell you today was told to me by one of my students when I was teaching in China, and her English name was Raynee. And she told me this story about her earliest memory, and I thought it was so beautiful that I decided to turn it into a story for a book. It was kite flying time in Lanzhou in Gansu province, China. I was just 6 years old and I was very excited. I loved to fly kites. Especially I loved to fly the kites my grandfather made. They were very special, and each year my grandfather made me a new kite, which was different to the ones he'd made before. And it seemed to me as though every kite he made was more beautiful than the one he'd made the year before. Very soon there was a knock on the door of our apartment, and there stood grandfather with a beautiful green butterfly kite in his hands. "Well, my little princess," he said in his deep, kindly voice, "are you ready to come on an adventure with me out to the countryside so that we can fly this little beauty?" "Oh, yes, yeah, I said breathlessly. Now in China, grandfathers are called yeah. "Oh yes, I can't wait to fly the beautiful butterfly." I put on my coat because it was still cold outside and went with my grandfather to catch the bus out to the countryside. We went to a place just outside Yuzhong, a small town just outside Lanzhou, where there was a perfect place to fly a kite. When we got to the wide grassy space outside the town, we climbed off the bus, but remembering to say "谢谢" to the bus driver, who smiled at me and said, "Happy kite flying, little princess." I smiled back and I blew him a kiss. We soon reached the grassy open space, and grandfather laid out the beautiful kite with her lovely long tail out on the grass. There were some other people there flying their kites. One had 4 kites all on one string, on one stick, and someone else had a dragon kite, but not one of the kites was as beautiful as my green butterfly. When grandfather had laid the kite out, he took the ball of string and he tied one end of it to the underside of the butterfly. Then he went a little way away, with the string in his hand, unwinding it as he went. "Now, Raynee, pick up the butterfly," he said, "and when I tell you to start to run with her, let go when I tell you. Okay?" I was so excited. I picked up the kite, and when grandfather shouted 1, 2, 3, I started to run as fast as my 6-year-old legs would carry me. "Let her go!" shouted grandfather. So I let go, and the beautiful queen of butterflies leapt up into the blue sky. There was a strong wind that day, and the butterfly queen flew higher and higher and higher, and grandfather let me have a turn at holding the string. She tugged and she tugged and she tugged at the string, wanting to go higher. We pulled her in until she was dancing just off the ground in front of us. She wanted to be up away again into the clouds, but grandfather grounded her while we ate our lunch, and then grandfather said, "Let's fly her one more time, Raynee, before we go home." The butterfly was anxious to be off, and she bounded into the air. Soon she looked like a tiny little spot in the sky. She was far higher than any of the other kites, and I was so happy. My butterfly queen was the best kite on that field, and she was mine. All of a sudden there was a gust of very strong wind that struck the kite. Grandfather felt the huge tug, and then the string snapped. The line was broken, and my beautiful butterfly flew far, far away. I began to cry, and as the kite flew further and further away, I cried louder and louder. Poor grandfather was very anxious and upset that I was crying, and he didn't know what to do. And finally he put his arms around me and gave me his handkerchief. "Here, Rainey, wipe your tears away," he said softly. Then he said, "Rainey, the butterfly queen will fly to Nai-Nai's new home." Now Nai-Nai is what we Chinese children call our grandmother. Your grandma wants to share your happy day, so she's called your butterfly to her. Don't worry, my dear. I stopped crying and said through my tears, "Really? Will Nai-Nai like my butterfly queen? Can the butterfly find her way to her house?" "Yes," said Grandfather, "I believe that she can." "Can the butterfly tell Nai-Nai I miss her so much?" "Yes, it can." Hearing what my grandfather said made me much happier, but then I saw the tears in my grandfather's eyes, and I knew that he missed Nai-Nai very much indeed. "Rainee," Grandfather said, brushing his hands across his eyes, "I will make you another kite, even better than this one." Grandfather was as good as his word, and the next spring kite flying festival we flew an even more beautiful kite. This time, on our last flight, we wrote a note to Nai-Nai, and we put a hole in the middle and watched the note go higher and higher and higher up the string until it reached the kite. Then Grandfather cut the string, and the kite leapt up into the air and flew far, far away to Grandma's house in the sky. So from that time on, every spring until I went to university, Grandpa and I would fly a kite, and on the last flight we would send a letter to Nai-Nai, Grandma. Now every spring I fly a kite alone, and I send 2 letters, one for Nai-Nai and one for Ye-Ye. I think they must be very happy in heaven, but I'm sure they miss me very much.